talked about community, and you know, the root of the word community is commune, and that's when we come together and break bread. And so food really brings people together, and it's brought us together to have a great conversation about this fabulous book. And everything that you see within this book, I mentioned, is just kind of woven into the world that Ouita has created around food. And so the illustrations by Brenna Flannery. Brenna is the fiance of the chef at Holly Hill, Tyler McNabb. And then Sarah Gibbs and Jeannie Graff, Ouita's co-authors, are both really talented communicators and chefs. And they have worked with Ouita for many years. So I am just thrilled to be able to bring you all this book in the Big Blue Book Club. One of the things that we mentioned earlier was that we were going to do I tell you, if you don't have your microphone muted, if you could do that, I think it would help us here. Thank you. So I mentioned that we were going to do a poll and ask if you all have been to any of the restaurants that are all in the central Kentucky area. So if you don't live here, maybe you visited here, but I know that we have people from all over. And so Mindy, could you put up that poll and let's see who's been to a restaurant? So Holly Hill Inn is the one that I mentioned that's in Midway. Honeywood is in Lexington out in the Summit. Midway Bakery is in Midway in an old school building. Smithtown Seafood is downtown by the West 6 Brewery building in the old bread box. They used to make bread in that building. Wallace Station is also right around Midway. Windy Corner Market is out one of the pikes. So if you go out Paris Pike, there's Beautiful Drive, and you make a right on Muir Station Road. It's gorgeous. And then Zim's Cafe is downtown in the old courthouse. So that's the family of restaurants that are Ouita Michel restaurants. And we just thought we'd ask how many of you all have been. So mark all the ones that you've been to.
Looks like they're slowing down now.
Okay.
I'm going to give it a couple more and then we'll end and we'll let everybody see the results.
Okay. So this family of restaurants just serves so many different kinds of food, but they are all a good, solid version of Kentucky food. Now look at that. Look at all you people that have enjoyed a fine meal at Holly Hill Inn. That is my favorite restaurant ever. I consider myself so lucky to live close to it. And Wallace Station. So if you're a big Wallace Station fan, this book's got a lot of secret recipes in it for you. I was so glad to get the pimento cheese recipe. I love pimento cheese. So the connection to what we grew up with, I grew up with a good pimento cheese. My mom would use a meat grinder to make it, and it wouldn't be very mayonnaise-y, you know, and she would put quite a bit of pimento in it. And so in the introduction, Silas House talks about how Ouita talks about that food is love. And indeed, many of us love to feed people, and that is the great joy in making something that tastes really good, that you can then share with someone. And I mentioned that Weissenberger Mill is just down the road from me. And a lot of times when they have a product, like you'll buy a bag of cornmeal mix, and it will have a label on it that says where the grain is from, what farm. And so that kind of connection that Ouita talked about in the video is something that's really special. So I hope that you all will be able to work in some locally sourced foods. I know a lot of you probably grow your own gardens and do some food preservation activities. So I hope that you'll find a spot for those good ingredients that you have. So let's start off now with the breakfast chapter. Boy, there's some good stuff in there. I'll tell you all that right now, today and tomorrow, Ouita Michel and her crew are serving food out at Fasig-Tipton for the horse sales here in Lexington. And breakfast is so popular out there. The biscuit sandwiches, and I saw where somebody made the biscuits and gravy. And I love that recipe and the description that Steve Rose, one of the fellows that works at Windy Corner, gave in the book about how he makes his gravy. And so why don't you all tell us in the chat box, what is your number one have to make recipe in the breakfast chapter? And there's a lot of good stuff in there. And so, you know, you can talk about the breakfast plates or breakfast sandwiches, sausage and gravy. I have to tell you that for me, Ouita's Sardou Panini is one of my favorite sandwiches. Eggs, butter, artichoke, spinach. Hard to beat that combination for me. And so tell us in the chat box, what's your number one thing that you need to make out of the breakfast chapter? Oh, the biscuits and gravy and the blueberry muffins, cheese grits.
I saw we had a question about the hollandaise.
Hollandaise, yeah. Do you want to unmute and ask your hollandaise question?
Yes, please. I have a question on the hollandaise one. I'm cooking quite a bit, and I always use raw egg yolks when I do my sauce hollandaise. So and it says here 3 hard-cooked egg yolks. Now, that's for me totally new. Now, granted, I'm from Europe, so this is, you know, Kentucky cooking here is a whole different ballgame. So I just wanted to get an idea about that.
Let me ask Ouita. I'll get to her tonight and I'll have the answer.
Awesome, thank you.
Next week, you're welcome. Because, you know, I sometimes, have you ever made the blender béarnaise that's in Joy of Cooking? Yeah. And so that is also the way that I am familiar with making something in a blender or a food processor.
No, I always make it over a hot water bath.
Yeah.
So with the raw egg yolk, and then maybe some wine, and then the béarnaise obviously has a totally different base. And then, you know, I beat it up. But, you know,
I assume this is correct because it says that the butter is only softened and not, you know how the butter is hot when you do the blender version.
Well, when you do when you do the water bath, it is hot, it's liquid.
Well, it is also in the blender.
So ask her, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, and so I will look at that, but I assume since there is not a hot or a heating step,
and to say, I love spinach on bread.
It would be a lot more foolproof for sure. You know, if you weren't, I don't know if you've ever had yours break before.
One time, but I know how to fix it.
Okay.
But I tell you what, Janet, I love the spinach artichoke spread.
Yeah, I can put that on anything, and I am the same way with like the hollandaise. So somebody, it looks like, made the quiche with country ham, apple, and cheddar. And somebody, you all, has got zucchini bread cooking right now. Can you imagine how their house smells? So a lot of votes for the grits. I remember when I lived briefly, I worked for Kellogg's, you all, for 3 years up in Battle Creek, Michigan. And that was like in the 90s, and nobody else would eat the grits. And so there was a Cracker Barrel that we loved to go eat at, and everybody would want to give me their grits. And, you know, I can eat 1 or 2 servings, but I can't really eat everyone's grits. But we do love grits now. And oh, the biscuits and gravy is staple. And the sweet potato streusel muffins do sound fabulous. Yeah, I love a good muffin and some of the things with the bakery. Oh, Mindy, you were not a grits fan until Holly Hill, so they persuaded you. Yeah. One of my favorite dishes at the other restaurants is shrimp and grits. So it's great to hear your number 1 picks for those breakfast dishes. And I love breakfast for dinner. I don't know how many of you all do, but there's just something about breakfast for dinner. It's like you can take all your time and really enjoy it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the next chapter, which is the sandwich chapter. And what I really like about that is how Ouita talks about the different layers that build up a sandwich. And I find that to be true, like the Wallace Station sandwiches. You know, you start with the homemade bread. When I saw that somebody had made a homemade loaf of rye bread, I'm like, oh, because I actually love to order the Ouita Sardu panini on rye bread, or the pimento cheese on rye bread. Yeah, so those kind of layers in the sandwiches are really something that is important. And I'm curious, how many people, and I don't know, Mindy, can we do a raise hand? If we, yeah, so under reactions, if you want to go down to the bottom, you can see a little yes, a green click. So let's do that. So click on the, go down to reactions and click on green. If you grew up or had heard of panini sandwiches before, say the last few years. Yes, people have, well, my goodness, I was just not in the know. And so tell me, you all, how did you learn about paninis? You can put it in the chat box or you can unmute.
I was going to say my mom used to make paninis.
Really?
She was raised in the Northeast, so maybe it was a Northeastern.
Yeah.
I don't know.
German
Era, I love that. Yep.
on vacation in New York, ate it in a restaurant and at Wallace Station. Yeah. Because, you know, a lot of us don't have panini presses. But what we used when I was a kid, which is also what is described in the cookbook on page 54, was a waffle iron that you would turn over to the smooth side. There was another set of plates that you could put in there. And that's how we did it. Oh, somebody's dad was a baker. Oh, the George Foreman grill. Yeah, that had a panini feature. But I just wanted to point out that if you don't have any special equipment, on page 54, there's a few ways that Ouita describes that you could do it. And one is to take another cast iron skillet and just put it on top and press your sandwiches down. I can tell you from experience in my house growing up that if you do it over and over again with just a spatula and you keep pushing down, it's really hard on your spatulas. I believe I may have broken a couple. But getting that crispy outside on the panini is so important for that sandwich. Some of you all might be familiar with the baker, Jason Smith, who is from Kentucky. And one time on the Food Network, he did a feature on the best sandwich I ever ate. And it was the pimento cheese sandwich, I believe, but it was from Wallace Station. And so they got those panini makers lined up there, and they just scrunch them down. Smashed cheese sandwiches. Yep. Oh, my mom had a foil covered brick that she used to press grilled sandwiches. I love that. Boy, that is a great idea. I remember one time I gave somebody a breakfast set that had like a bacon smasher that you could put on top. I love the foiled covered brick idea because that would really, get the crunch. And, I think sandwiches a lot of times don't get respect, you all. It's like, oh, it's just a sandwich. Well, it's not just a sandwich. The baker's name is, I believe, Jason Smith, Smith. And he was on the Food Network. I can look him up and we can get some more info. So also in the sandwich chapter, Ouita talks about different kinds of layers and flavors that you can bring in as building blocks. And some of those things are, things that you would make ahead of time. I mentioned I was especially glad to have the pimento cheese. Thank you. It's on page 25. Jason Smith of Grayson, Kentucky is our baker. Thank you, Yvonne. So both the pimento cheese and, the Benedictine spread are things that you can make and have on hand. And then she talks about roasting the meats, making different kinds of egg salad, or using tomatoes and olives or tomato jam. It's just cranberry mustard. And Ouita makes a lot of mustards that are available for sale in a jar. So there's a banana pepper mustard that I love, and I actually use that to make banana pepper sorghum salad dressing out of. And okay, so Melissa is saying, I'm so glad to read that Ouita grew up on bologna and Velveeta. That is some good stuff, isn't it? I always assumed a chef comes out of the womb eating sardo paninis and porchetta. It gives me hope that I will continue to evolve. I got to tell you all, one of the greatest things about Ouita is there is not a snooty bone in her body. She just loves good food. And so that's one of the great things about eating at her restaurants. She mentions Shaker and Kentucky hospitality a lot in the book. And if there is anybody that knows how to make you kindly welcome, it is this woman. And she is a great ambassador for our state. So Melissa, thank you for sharing that insight. And it is great to know her as a chef and to know that when somebody likes food and somebody loves food and wants to share food, there's no need for us to be snooty about it. Some of the simplest things. It's hard to beat a tomato sandwich, especially this time of year. We can argue over which mayonnaise to use if you want to. So the sandwiches are many times crunchy, a lot of times have these special ingredients that are made ahead of time. And another thing, somebody is saying, the Bradleys, another wonderful thing about Ouita is her support for local farmers and locally sourced ingredients. the support of her local restaurants. Sandra, girl, I am with you. Duke's is the way to go. I really think Ouita has established a relationship with so many farmers in this area, and it is not easy sometimes. It's a lot easier than it was when I started in this job 25 years ago, though, to find local eggs or a farmer's market. Think about how far we have come in Kentucky in terms of being able to go out and buy local foods. I mean, there's a farmer's market available to me in different towns almost every day of the week. Somebody asked where you can buy Dukes in the Lexington area. It's at Kroger. I get just buy mine at Kroger, usually. And it is a good meal. You can use Hellman's if you want. And, you know, there are people who prefer Miracle Whip. I grew up with Miracle Whip. But people have very strong feelings about mayonnaise, don't they? And there's even some recipes in here about how to make your own aioli or mayonnaise. So some of the things that I think in the sandwich chapter that are so interesting are those different layers and different building blocks that you can make and make sandwiches and think maybe little pickled vegetables that go with them. And another great thing about this book that we'll go into is how good sandwiches go with soups and salads and make good combinations. And so I'm really happy that you all are also enthusiastic about the sandwiches. And how about quiche? Did you all grow up eating quiche? It kind of came into being as I was growing up. I remember there was a debate, Mindy and I talked about this, about how to pronounce it. And then I remember the whole real men eat quiche. And so, yeah, quiche is another thing. And it's just so portable, really. And you can do so much with the different ingredients. And especially when fresh asparagus season is in, quiche is something that we can really enjoy and pretty easy to make and take, which is another thing.
And freeze, Janet, and they freeze fantastic. And there's beautiful quiches out there with tomatoes, with our fresh maters coming up now. I mean, it's just, and fresh basil. There's, you can just.
Yes. Okay, somebody says they've never had quiche. I would invite you to try the quiche recipe. There's a whole segment of a chapter, I think, on them. And they do freeze beautifully. I saw, did anybody else see that article in the news the other day about how we have forgotten how to make a good pie crust? And I think that is something that, you know, it's not that difficult to do, but, you know, knowing how to make a good pie crust can go a long way. And then again, a lot of people will do crustless versions. I personally love crust. You know, why pass up something like a biscuit if you don't have to? That's my motto. So the quiches are another good thing that we hope that you all will give a try and see. So we're going to take a break and go into some breakout rooms so you all can have a little smaller conversation and have more of a chance to talk. I'll invite you while you're in the breakout rooms to share with other people when you introduce yourself who taught you to cook. My grandmother taught me how to cook. So share who taught you how to cook, if you would. And I think, Mindy, are you ready to make the magic? And we will bring you back at about 5 till. And so you're going to have about 15 minutes to talk among yourselves. And then about 5 till we'll come back and just kind of touch base and tell you about what we're going to do next week. Next week, you all, we're going to learn a little bit more about pinto beans. And we're also going to talk about cornbread and coleslaw so we can have a conversation. You know, cornbread is kind of like mayonnaise. People have their way. And so we'll talk about it, and we'll get it all out on the table.
Sweet or not sweet, right?
So next week we're going to talk about po' boys, burgers, salads, and soups. And like I mentioned, we'll learn more about pinto beans and also talk about cornbread and coleslaw. Oh, cornbread leads to fights in Brian's house. Brian, fighting over the cornbread. Well, we'll get all the scoop next week when you come to the session. Yeah, that sweet versus savory, that'll get us, won't it? Do you like green chilies? Cheese, some people like cheese. So there will be a lot to talk about next week, and I just want to thank you all for coming to be a part of this community this evening and participating in the Big Blue Book Club. Mindy and I were talking earlier today, and what we said was this online Big Blue Book Club is one of the great things that came out of 2020. Because otherwise, I don't think, many of us would have tried things like this, and we would not have thought that it would have been so popular. And so thank you for joining us and for logging on. And we really look forward to seeing you next week. Mindy, do you have words for us?
Well, I saw a question. Someone asked if they were being recorded, and they are. And so I will send out a link to the recording when I send reminders for next week, so that you'll have that as well. So, and then it's also on our YouTube channel. You can find our YouTube channel is FACS Learning Channel. If you're on YouTube, you can look for it there. So we'll be there as well. So yeah, that's I really appreciate all that Janet has done to put this together for us, and especially her pre-meeting with Ouita to preempt the book, I guess, and give us some insight into what Ouita was thinking as she put it together. I know it's been a great time for all of us to explore the book and get to try some of the recipes, because it's lots and lots of fun. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Janet, for leading this great session.
My pleasure. Good night, you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was awesome. I appreciate it.
Good night.
Night.
Have a great evening.
Great host,
Good night.
Janet. Thank you, Janet.
Good night. Glad I got to see everybody. Okay.